Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in this morning. Before we get started, I'm going to give a land acknowledgement. As we learn about the significance of water this week, let us also reflect on the land on which we gather, understand the history of the land on which we live, and that provides us with this precious resource of water. Niagara Region is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattawandurunk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The Niagara Children's Water Festival stands with all Indigenous peoples, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live and of the water which sustains us. So this morning we're going to be learning about climate change. For some of you, this might be new, and some of you may have heard of this before. But to get started, we need to learn about the difference between climate and weather. So weather is the state of air in any given place. So today it's sunny, it's pretty warm, but it's not hot. And climate is weather over a long period of time. So climate helps us to know what kind of clothes we should have in our closet. We know what the climate or the weather is going to be like because the climate's been that way for a long period of time. So where we live in the Niagara region, I know that I need a winter jacket for all the snowy cold conditions in our winters. I have a hoodie for the fall time because I know it's going to be a little bit cold, but not as cold as the winter. I have a t-shirt for the summertime because it's usually hot and sunny. And I have a rainproof jacket for our springtime because I know we're probably going to get a lot of rain. The main difference, again, between climate and weather is the period of time. So weather, think short period of time. Climate is weather over a long period of time. Can you think of somewhere in the world that you believe would have a different climate than us? I'm going to use Florida as my example. If Florida has a different climate, then they probably have different clothes in their closet than us. So if someone from Florida gathered all their clothes in their closet and brought them to Canada in the winter for a vacation, they probably wouldn't have the right clothes in their closet to enjoy the Canadian winters. The same goes for the plants and animals that live in different climates. They're used to the type of weather that they experience daily or seasonally in the climate they live in. And what does it mean if the climate changes? Well, you know that the weather can change, and so can the climate. It just takes a longer period of time. So this change can happen naturally. And in fact, it has happened naturally over millions of years. The climate has warmed and cooled many times. So greenhouse gases trap the sun from the energy from the sun in the atmosphere. And that keeps the sun's heat in our atmosphere and actually makes it warm enough that life can live on this planet. So let's turn it over to Bill Nye the Science Guy for a little demonstration about one very important greenhouse gas.
If you want, you can replicate this effect yourself in a simple lab experiment. Here's how. Take two identical bottles and set them side by side. Put a thermometer in each bottle and seal them. Then run a hose from a source of CO2 into one of the bottles. Shine two heat lamps of equal intensity at equal distance onto each one. Within minutes, you will see the temperature of the bottle with the carbon dioxide in it rising faster and higher. The bottles are like our atmosphere. The lamps are like our sun.
Okay, so we learned about carbon dioxide or CO2. And basically what we learned in that experiment is that the jar with the carbon dioxide in it, we saw that it heated up a lot more quickly and to a higher temperature. So why does CO2 matter to us? Well, carbon dioxide or CO2 is actually a greenhouse gas that humans are creating at a very fast rate in a high volume. When do we create this CO2? Well, it's released when we burn fossil fuels. And we burn fossil fuels sometimes when we use electricity, we drive our cars, we fly planes, or we heat our houses. What does it matter if the CO2 is changing the climate? Well, a change in climate equals a change in weather over a long period of time. And that could mean more rain, less rain, warmer temperatures, cooler temperatures. And that can be stressful for the people, plants, and animals experiencing these changes because it's happening so quickly that they can't prepare for it. How did we get here? It's important to remember that human-induced climate change was not on purpose. That was not the goal. The goal of burning fossil fuels was to make our lives easier. So one really great quote that I like is from Seth's blog, and it says, "Our Earth doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to start. Until someone builds a plastic-free helmet, you'll need to wear a plastic one when you ride your bike or play football. Even though natural gas heats your town swimming pool, you should still swim in it and have fun. If you have to take an airplane because there's no other way to get there, it's okay, don't worry about it. Fixing everything won't happen for a while, and kids should just do their best." And I really like that because it's true. So here are a few choices that kids can make to help reduce their contribution of carbon dioxide. We can eat fruits and vegetables that are grown locally, and we know we have some really great options here in Niagara. We can choose to ride our bikes or walk instead of drive our cars. And we can cut down on our time spent on our electronics and remember to turn them off when we're not using them. Maybe some of you are already doing these things, or maybe they're new to you. It's important to remember that climate change is a very complicated problem, and it's going to require effort from all of us, so just do your best. I know that was a lot of information to take in this morning, so thank you for your attention during my presentation. And now I'm going to do my best to answer any questions that you have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. I'm so glad that we now know the difference between weather and climate. And you're absolutely right. We do have a ton of questions rolling in. So the first one is from Miss Lusk, grade 2-3 class in Welland. And they're wondering, what are the different types of extreme weather?
Different types of extreme weather could be tornadoes, hurricanes, tsunamis. Those are the examples I can think of off the top of my head. If you want some more answers to any of these questions, I will be doing my best to get back to you with these answers if I can't answer them during this period.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather. Those are some great types. And our next question is from Mrs. Warren's grade 4-5 class, and they would like to know, can cutting down trees contribute to climate change?
Yeah, so trees actually use carbon dioxide, so they breathe it in. So if we have a forest breathing in that carbon dioxide and converting it into oxygen, and we cut it down, then that's less carbon dioxide being pulled out of the atmosphere. So that's how cutting down trees would contribute to climate change.
Awesome, good to know. In Mr. Vanderbeck's grade 3 class in Fort Erie, they're curious to learn, how serious could climate change become?
Climate change is one of the most serious issues that the health of our planet is currently facing. As I said before, it is really complicated. We have a lot of our world's top scientists and environmental professionals doing their best to think of ways to address this problem because it is serious. And as you grow up, it'll be a problem that will likely be a widely known problem. It'll be something that's talked about for sure.
Perfect, great answer. And we have another question from Mrs. Gravel's grade 3 class. grade 3 class, and they're asking, what can I do to help with climate change?
That's a great question, and I'm really excited that you want to do your best to help with climate change. So a couple of the things that I mentioned in my presentation is even just talking to your parents about what you learned today, because you're young and you don't make as many decisions as adults do. Talking to your parents about the 3 options that I talked about would be eating our fruits and vegetables that are grown locally, walking or riding bikes instead of driving our cars, and cutting down our time spent on our electronics and remembering to turn them off when we're not using them.
Awesome. I'm sure we can all follow those simple rules. So I have another question from Mrs. Stewart's grade 3-4 class, and they're wondering, what would happen if climate change stopped?
That's a really great question, and actually something that I hadn't thought about. But to give an answer off of the top of my head, if human-induced climate change stopped, because we know that it does happen naturally, for a long period of time, we would see the current climates in the Earth just behaving as we've already seen them behave. So we wouldn't see these big changes that we're seeing as a result of human-induced climate change. That might not exactly answer your question, but if climate change stopped, then maybe nothing out of the ordinary would be happening.
Perfect. Great answer. And we have a question from Miss Nash's grade 4 class, and they're wondering, how does using our electronics increase the CO2?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So here in Niagara, we're fortunate to have Niagara Falls. And Niagara Falls generates a lot of the electricity that we use. So when the water rushes over the falls, we use that force to create electricity. But that's not the only way that you can create electricity. You can create electricity by burning fossil fuels. So when we burn fossil fuels, we release carbon dioxide, and that's how we're contributing to climate change, by using electricity, but it's specifically produced from burning fossil fuels. There's other ways to create energy. Maybe some of you have heard of electric cars. So if we were using something like the sun to create electricity, the wind to create electricity, when we're creating electricity that way, we're not releasing carbon dioxide.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, Heather. And we have another question from Mrs. Stewart's grade 3-4 class, and they're wondering, can extreme weather contribute to climate change?
I would say that extreme weather is a result of climate change I wouldn't say that extreme weather contributes to climate change. Though in some ways it might. Maybe if you had a tornado and it took out a large part of the forest, you could say that not having those trees there to soak up that carbon dioxide is contributing to climate change. But overall, I would say that climate change creates extreme weather events.
Perfect. That was a tricky one. And Madame Netherway's grade 4 class is wondering, what is the most extreme natural disaster that could happen? This is kind of tricky.
I think that I should get back to you on that one because I'm not an expert at weather, but that is a great question. Thank you.
So we'll make sure we get back to Madame Netherway's class for that one. You guys are thinking today. All right, I have one more question for you, and it's from Mrs. Bell's grade 2 class, and they're wondering, what actions are you taking to help reduce the impact of climate change?
I love that. I am presenting about climate change, so that is a great question for me. I personally do try and get out for a walk or ride my bike instead of driving my car. I do love to eat our local fruits and vegetables and buy as many groceries as I can locally. And I also do try to reduce my time on electronics. I like to try and enjoy things that don't need electricity, maybe playing with a friend, having a nice conversation, playing some basketball, or just enjoying the evening outside instead of inside with all the lights on or watching a movie. Though I don't do this perfectly, I want to remind you that we're all just making an effort. So of course I do drive my car and watch movies, and sometimes I get fruits or vegetables that are not grown locally. So it's really important to remember that we're all just making our best effort, and that's really the key.
That's amazing, Heather. I think you're a great example for all of us. So we have another question, and this is from Mr. McDonough's grade 4 class, and they're wondering, how long has human activity been speeding up climate change?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm going to give my best answer, but definitely something for the teachers to chime in about. So essentially, before we had the Industrial Revolution, we were doing a lot of things by hand or using animals to do the work that we were like plowing our fields, building our houses, moving things around for us. So before we had the burning of fossil fuels, doing a lot of the work that we're doing, we weren't seeing this human-induced climate change happen. So if you look at a chart, and if this is my chart and this is the CO2, it's pretty much the Industrial Revolution, and then CO2 really starts to increase. So it's really within the last 200 years, I want to say, maybe a shorter amount of time. Don't quote me on that, but essentially when we do things that are not burning fossil fuels, we're not seeing that rise in carbon dioxide, and we're not seeing the climate change as quickly as we are right now.
Great answer, Heather. And we have another question from Mrs. Stewart's grade 3-4 class, and they're wondering, what would happen if climate change keeps going on?
Yeah, so certain negative consequences of climate change. Remember when I talked about earlier having a different climate and the plants and animals in that climate being used to that climate? So if they are experiencing different weather and they're not used to it, then it's going to be harder for them to find enough food, to find the right shelter, to find nesting materials, that kind of thing. Everything kind of gets out of sync because the plants and animals really just respond to their environment, and they are adapted to the climate they live in. And when I say they're adapted to the climate they live in, that kind of means that their bodies or genetics just are used to that climate and respond accordingly. So if that's a big change, they're no longer able to respond to the new climate because it's happening so quickly. So we would see things like more extreme weather events, a loss of plants and animal species, more droughts, which isn't good for farmers, increasing water levels, which might put some people into their homes are getting flooded or their areas are getting flooded. So just pretty unfavorable conditions as the climate changes.
Awesome answer, Heather. And I think our last question for today, this one might be a tricky one, and it's from Mrs. McDonough's grade 4 class, and they're wondering, how much oxygen would 10 trees give us?
Wow, that is a really tricky question. I'm sure it can be figured out. It definitely depends on the size of the tree, what kind of tree it is. So that is a question that I'm going to look into for you and get back to you about.
Perfect. We'll make sure we get back to you on that. And thank you so much, Heather, for your presentation today. That was great content, and we learned so much. And thank you guys for joining us today at the 2022 Niagara Children's Water Festival.